For more than 6 centuries, the Ottoman dynasty ruled from the grandest palaces in the world, commanding an empire across 3 continents. It seemed permanent. Then in 1922, the sultanate was abolished. The last sultan slipped out of Constantinople aboard a British warship. 2 years later, the caliphate followed. And with a single law, every member of the dynasty was expelled from Turkey. Princes, princesses, children, scattered across Europe and the Middle East. The Ottoman Empire disappeared. But what happened to the family that ruled it for 6 centuries? For generation after generation, the House of Osman functioned as a vast, self-sustaining ecosystem. The Sultan held absolute political authority, while the Caliphate carried immense religious symbolism across the entire Islamic world. Within the walls of Istanbul's grand palaces, daily life operated as a highly disciplined and demanding administrative network. Princes, princesses, consorts, and advisors held specific duties, their marriages and appointments carefully arranged to secure international influence and regional stability. This inherited privilege carried heavy obligations. Every member of the imperial household was a structural pillar of the state. Because of this rigorous structure, the dynasty appeared completely permanent, woven directly into the fabric of daily life. Yet, by the early 20th century, visible fractures began to show within this political order. What happens when an institution that seemed unbreakable suddenly loses its throne? The collapse came swiftly, following defeat in the First World War and the Allied occupation of Constantinople. Rising Turkish nationalist forces squeezed the imperial government to its breaking point. On November 1st, 1922, the Grand National Assembly in Ankara abolished the Sultanate, ending over 6 centuries of dynastic rule. 2 weeks later, on the rainy morning of November 17th, the last sovereign, Mehmed VI, stepped out of a back gate of Dolmabahce Palace. Guided by British General Charles Harrington, the deposed monarch, accompanied only by British guards and his 10-year-old son, Prince Mehmed Ertugrul, boarded an ambulance to reach the harbor. There, the British battleship HMS Malaya waited to carry them away, reaching Malta on December 9th. As the warship slipped into the Sea of Marmara, it carried a family suddenly stripped of sovereignty. Official naval logs and customs records from that day describe a modest departure, noting the Sultan carried only personal correspondence, clothes, and a purse containing 1,000 pounds. Yet, as the ship disappeared over the horizon, rumors of a smuggled imperial fortune began to spread. What did the last Sultan truly take with him? The fragile status quo shattered completely on March 3, 1924, when the Grand National Assembly passed Law Number 431. This decree abolished the Caliphate and ordered the immediate expulsion of every remaining member of the imperial household. The decision targeted 156 individuals, including princes, princesses, spouses, and children. The state stripped them of Turkish citizenship, issuing instead one-way, stateless travel documents that barred them from ever returning. Official records and survivor memoirs present conflicting timelines regarding their departure. while the legal text mandated a 3-day window to leave the country. Later accounts suggest some families received up to 10 days. Regardless of the exact timeline, the transition was chaotic. Relatives and dependents separated at Istanbul's Sirkeci railway station and the city's busy ports, boarding trains and steamships with limited personal belongings. Stripped of their ancestral homes and assets, this scattered diaspora began moving toward uncertain futures in Paris, Nice, Cairo, and Beirut, relying on whatever connections they could find to survive. The train tracks branching out from Istanbul led to vastly different worlds. For the deposed Caliph, Abdul Mehmed II, exile meant a quiet apartment in Paris, where he traded his political title for a paintbrush, capturing his family on canvas. On the Italian Riviera, the last Sultan, Mehmed VI, spent his final years in the coastal town of San Remo, relying on a rapidly dwindling purse. Further south, Egypt's bustling ports of Alexandria and Cairo welcomed younger princes like Seizure Ali Vasib, who secured modest government work to pay the rent. Yet, the most dramatic shift lay far to the east. In 1931, Princess Durusavar and her cousin Niloufer married into the fabulously wealthy ruling family of Hyderabad, India, bridging their stateless reality with unimaginable luxury. How could the same decree send one prince to a factory floor and another to an Indian palace? The answer lay in what remained behind. Under the 1922 abandoned property law, the Turkish state seized the vast imperial estates, converting Dolmabahce and Yildiz palaces from family homes into national property. Official inventories recorded the furniture, silver, and court objects left in the grand halls, many of which were quickly liquidated in public auctions. While the state-held regalia and crown jewels remained locked in government vaults, the departing royals carried only what they could pack. Rumors of a secret Ottoman gold hoard in Swiss banks persist in family legend, but no customs records or banking archives have ever shown evidence of such wealth. Instead, most exiles departed with a one-time cash allowance, often reported as a mere £1,000 or lira, forcing a family raised in gilded rooms to face a cold world where their material foundation had completely vanished. For decades, the bustling Mediterranean port of Alexandria became more than a temporary refuge for Seizure Ali Vasib. It became his home. His personal memoirs, Bir Seizadenin Hatirati, preserve the quiet reality of this daily exile. In its pages, the grand titles of the imperial past faded behind the immediate pressures of managing visas, paying rent, and securing schooling for his children. While official employment contracts are lost to time, historians interpret family letters as evidence that the prince secured a modest government post to keep his household afloat. He was not alone in this quiet reinvention. Other princes adapted by turning to business, translation, or military instruction, trade-offs made to preserve family dignity. In these rented rooms, the true sacrifice was not a lost throne, but the quiet surrender of courtly expectations as they raised children to live entirely ordinary lives. On November 12, 1931, a double wedding in Nice temporarily restored imperial splendor. Princesses Durusavar and Nilufar married the sons of the wealthy Nizam of Hyderabad. Yet, while these alliances opened the doors to Indian palaces, they could not restore the lost Ottoman estates. The wealth belonged to a foreign house. A different path unfolded for Princess Neslisa, granddaughter of both the last Sultan and the last Caliph. Her 1940 marriage to Prince Mohammed Abdelmanem of Egypt eventually thrust her into Cairo's political arena during a short-lived regency. Through these marriages, the women carried their language, faith, and customs into new lands as portable forms of identity. But for the children born to these unions in distant palaces, their imperial heritage was no longer a claim to power, but a collection of stories. Where then did these children truly consider home? For decades, the Ottoman name remained a legal crime inside the borders they once ruled. The Turkish Republic's early official records labeled the exiled family not as citizens but as outlaws and living symbols of a dead order. Under these strict decrees, any attempt to cross the border, even for a brief railway transit, was systematically denied. Yet, behind closed doors in Paris, Nice, and Cairo, the family lived in a parallel Turkish reality. Mothers insisted on speaking Turkish at the dinner table, ensuring children born in foreign hospitals learned the geography of a home they had never seen. During Ramadan, letters carrying pressed flowers and news of births crossed the Mediterranean, keeping a fragile network of cousins and aunts connected. Occasional, desperate petitions for family visits reached Ankara, only to be filed away or flatly rejected by ministries that viewed their very presence as a threat to the state. The descendants were trapped in a cruel contradiction. They remained profoundly, culturally Turkish, while the law of the land declared their existence illegal. For the children born in foreign hospital wards, the grand palaces of Istanbul were not memories but bedtime stories. This new generation grew up speaking French, English, or Arabic as their first languages, carrying passports from countries their grandparents had never visited. Among them was Osman Osman, a great-grandson of Sultan Mehmed VI. He spent decades in New York City, living a quiet, private life as a mining consultant, far removed from the ceremonial splendor of his ancestors. Across the globe, other descendants built careers as artists, academics, and business professionals, completely separated from any political ambition. Their connections to Turkey varied wildly. Some actively preserved family records, while others chose complete anonymity. They held no shared ideology, only a fractured inheritance of names and photographs. This diversity of lives leaves a quiet, unsettling question: when the crown is gone and the native tongue is lost, what actually remains of a dynasty besides a bloodline and a name? In 2014, descendants of Sultan Abdulhamid II filed a landmark inheritance lawsuit in Turkey, attempting to reclaim properties seized by the state. This legal battle exposed a sharp divide between official archives and family memories. What state inventories classified as public property descendants maintained were private possessions and family heirlooms, pointing to specific palace furnishings, and personal jewelry. To evaluate these disputes, historians divide the records into clear categories. Under the category of fact, the vast majority of imperial real estate was absorbed into national collections under the 1922 abandoned property law or sold at public auctions. In contrast, persistent claims of hidden wealth abroad, specifically Swiss bank accounts or secret gold hoards, belong strictly to the category of legend. No banking records, custom slips, or financial registries verify these assertions, and the historical dossier does not substantiate them. While private letters suggest some assets survived, this remains a family claim, interpreted by descendants as personal inheritance, while scholars treat it as a historical interpretation, untested by legal proof. The true limit of the Ottoman fortune is simply what can be documented. The legal doors to Turkey did not swing open overnight. It began quietly in 1952, when parliamentary and humanitarian pressures led to a partial amnesty. This amendment allowed female dynasts to return, though under strict conditions and temporary permits. Among these early, tentative returns was the reported visit of Princess Faria under diplomatic permission, a case still awaiting final archival verification. For the men, the wait lasted much longer. It was not until 1974 that a broader amnesty permitted surviving male members to return to their homeland permanently. In later years, Neslisa Sultan returned to Istanbul, forging a quiet, permanent connection with the city of her birth, far removed from her past life in Egypt. As these aging royals slipped back into the country, public attitudes began to change. The old political suspicion of the early republic softened into cultural curiosity and an interest in a shared heritage. They returned not as sovereigns making claims, but as private citizens. The legal process culminated in 2004, when new legislation made it easier for descendants to regain Turkish citizenship and settle permanently. This change allowed Osman Osman, who had spent decades in New York, to officially reclaim his passport and return to Istanbul. When he walked through the old city as an ordinary citizen, the circle closed. His homecoming raised a quiet question for a family scattered for 80 years. When the empire is gone, does home lie in the stones of a palace, or simply in the right to exist where your ancestors once ruled? The modern descendants of the House of Osman do not live in grand palaces, nor do they claim a vanished throne. Scattered across Istanbul, Paris, London, New York, and Beirut, they work as teachers, artists, business professionals, and ordinary citizens. For this generation, the imperial heritage is not a political mandate, but an intensely personal history, kept alive through old family letters, yellowed photographs, and the shared surname of Osmanoglu, now a legal identity rather than a ruling title. Their individual paths reflect the diverse ways a family adapts to displacement. Some descendants actively preserve the dynasty's archives, maintaining close ties to Turkey, while others maintain a quiet distance, viewing their lineage with a mix of indifference, academic curiosity, or even critical detachment. They hold no shared political platform or collective ambition, only a fractured inheritance of memory. This modern reality completes the long, complex arc that began with a quiet departure at the palace gates. The path wound through the rented rooms of working princes in Alexandria, the foreign palaces of married princesses in Hyderabad, the quiet suburban lives of children raised far from the Bosphorus, and the eventual, gradual return of families seeking their ancestral home. Each branch forged its own compromise between the heavy expectations of history and the simple necessity of building a private life. They have transitioned from sovereigns to citizens, finding continuity not in political authority, but in family survival. The empire is gone, but the lineage remains intact, scattered across a quiet global diaspora. When the grand halls are turned into museums and the titles are reduced to surnames on a passport, what actually remains of a dynasty? Today, the House of Osman exists not in golden halls, but in the quiet lives of ordinary citizens. Their survival proves that a dynasty's true legacy isn't defined by borders, but by the resilience of its bloodline. The empire is dust, but their story continues. What do you think of their survival? Join the conversation in the comments.